as investors, how should we be thinking about what the impacts are going to be? Because they're different in a lot of ways depending on the crop. Like corn and soy in the Midwest, their export markets, they're dependent. Like I think 60% of soybeans are exported, and those export markets are really being harmed. On the organic agriculture side, we grow, it's made in America, sold in America for the vast majority of the crops. And if there's a trade barrier about high value organic fruits and vegetables coming in, that's actually benefits the organic market. So there are these winners and losers here. How should we be thinking about, like when you think about kind of the ag sector as a whole, how do you think about winners and losers here?
So it's another great question, and we can point to some specific sectors and identify whether they win or lose. And those are somewhat obvious, but I think the question is what determines whether something wins or loses is a little bit more complicated. The world is a couple of immutable starting points, or at least if nothing else, I'll state them as though they're axiomatic, that truth unless proven otherwise. The world's demand for calories is going to go up a lot. And it's going to go up for two reasons. One, the world's population is still expanding, and that's a fairly predictable thing. Uh, this is a great map of that as well. This is the one that says when you do grow something, you capture a calorie at the sunlight. Do you put it into fuel? Those are the rich places of the world. Or do you put it into food? Those are the poorer places of the world. The western corner of Africa is going to be home to a very large share of the world's population by 2100. There's most estimates say 5 of the top 10 most populous countries will be in Western Africa. So the places you can grow and the places you consume depend on population, but even more importantly, on standard of living. So if you eat a calorie from a plant, you get a first generation 1 cycle calorie back from the sun. If you put it through a chicken, it may take about 3 calories to get a calorie back for human consumption. Pigs about 9 perhaps, cattle about 13 or 15 if you count dairy and so on. Um, so that's a lot. And what happens is as the country gets richer, its standards of living go up, and importantly, switch to more rich proteins, which take a lot more calories. And so the multiplication of calories is not just a longevity in a population, but more driven by standard of living. As standards of living increase, the quantity of things that you eat is very predictable. With this chart, if you look at it through time, you almost don't even need a date on the study. You start moving toward more meat, among other things, as you get richer, and at some point you top out the amount of meat you want to consume, and you start eating higher quality meat. The world is substituting and growing its demand for pork and chicken really rapidly, beef a little less rapidly, but there you go. By 2050, we're going to eat a ton of chickens, and we're going to add a ton of pork, and beef is going to go up, but in terms of total caloric change in the world, the others still dominate. You see missing from that are things like crickets and um, proteins that substitute for meat are really still very expensive in terms of energy use to produce. So those aren't on the graph either. But if you start with that, now you can answer the question you asked. What is going to be benefited? Well, the things you have to move to feed animals are probably long-term winners. So soybeans are still important, and corn is still really important. And for the rest of the world, wheat is still an important feed grain, not just food grain. So what about fruits and nuts and apples and cherries and um, uh, things that don't have as long of a shelf life, perhaps, as stored grain? Those are a lot more complicated to move. You can't process them as well and shrink the container in which you move them. So they're a little bit more sensitive to impacts of trade. We've overplanted some of the fruits and nuts. In the few places on the planet you can grow pistachios, there aren't that many good places to grow pistachios. And water is pretty critical and becoming more expensive in certain areas where tree nuts in particular are produced. So I think you can sort of point at least where some of the major friction points are. But that doesn't mean that the successful ones aren't still more. The final part of this really complicated puzzle is growing less doesn't make them a less attractive investment. Right sizing them still means that permanent crops, if you said magically we're going to grow exactly the amount we can consume on a world basis of both permanent crops and annual crops, the expected return on the permanent crops would exceed expected return on row crops because of the additional risk of the production company and the risk of part of the assets being above ground. But right now we're in a position of oversupply of certain parts of that. And each time you put on something that affects trade, the higher valued things are impacted first. And so that's kind of the waypoints on why you would expect it's, number two yellow corn. It's number two yellow corn. Really large non-pearl almonds are really valuable until they're not. You grow one too many of them and then it's paste. And so I think that sort of immutability kind of feature of the demand for some things helps explain it.